Hello, everybody. The webinar will begin very shortly. We'll just take a few moments to let everybody join. Mm. So good afternoon from London to everybody, but I know we have people coming in from lots of different countries. So good morning, good afternoon, or maybe even good evening, wherever you are joining us from. And welcome to today's webinar, where we're going to be looking at a modern approach to civil service productivity. I'm Siobhan Bonita. I'm a former UK civil servant, and I'm really delighted to be chairing this webinar on behalf of Global Government Forum, which is a publishing house that serves civil servants all around the world. And I'd also like to thank SAS, who are our knowledge partner for the webinar today. So in terms of that topic, in sort of improving civil service productivity, it's definitely true to say that over the years, civil services around the world have tried a whole range of different initiatives to try and improve efficiency. But these programs and these initiatives have often had mixed results. And now digital technologies and new technologies are offering new ways and new opportunities to boost productivity in government, but they also bring with them their own challenges and risks as well. So today we're going to be looking at things like what are some of those common productivity challenges facing governments around the world? What are the types of strategies that governments are already considering, whether that's using technology or changing culture, all of those kind of initiatives that governments are already trying? And what role can new technology and data play in particular in improving productivity, and how can those improvements be measured? We've got three expert speakers. In a moment, I'm going to introduce our speakers and I will be inviting them to give some opening remarks. But this webinar is also very much about you, our audience. So we want to get as many questions in from you and we will get through those before the end of the webinar. So at any point from now on, please do message in your comments or your questions, and on your device, you should see a Q&A function somewhere, a button on your screen. Please use that Q&A function to send in your questions and your comments. And we are going to have some other interactive parts, which I will come on to in a moment. But before I do that, let me just introduce, we have three great speakers. So I'm just going to introduce our speakers. So first we will be hearing from Daniel Dufour, who is Director General of Innovation at the Department of Natural Resources in Canada. And there Daniel leads the Clean Growth Hub, which is a whole of government focal point composed of 18 departments and agencies who look at providing frontline support to clean technology companies to help them navigate federal programming and clean technology regulations. Daniel also leads the department's Digital Accelerator to help advance the application of innovative digital technologies, including AI and machine learning. Then we will hear from Jennifer Robinson, who is Global Public Sector Strategic Advisor for our knowledge partner SAS. And Jennifer helps governments to maximize the use of their data through data integration, data management, and analytics. Jennifer co-wrote the book A Practical Guide to Analytics for Government and is featured in the book Smart Cities, Smart Future. In addition to writing articles and blogs about data-driven governing, she speaks with government leaders about emerging technologies and how to strategically adopt them. And then we head over to Brazil, where we will hear from Claudia Webby, who is Director for Government Innovation at the Ministry of Management and Public Service Innovation in Brazil. And Claudia leads efforts to transform the Brazilian public sector with innovative, inclusive, and people-centered management frameworks, and really focused on the culture. She also oversees an innovation lab focused on improving public value through enhanced employee experience and a behaviour insight unit called Synco. Claudia has 20 years of experience as a public policy and government management specialist, having held key roles in ministries of finance, economy, planning, budget, and management. And her expertise includes innovation, strategic management, and policy implementation. So I'm sure you'll agree with me. We have 3 great speakers. As I say, please do use this opportunity during our webinar to ask whatever questions you have, and you can do that using the Q&A function. However, before I hand over to Daniel to give us his opening remarks, I said we do want to make this a very interactive webinar. And as it's all about productivity, we want to ask you, the audience, 3 questions about the productivity challenge that you or your organizations might be facing. There are definitely no right or wrong answers to this, so please do play along with us and answer these questions. So it should come up on your screen in a moment. I'm going to ask the first question to the audience, and that question is, what would you say is the primary reason for the productivity challenge in your organization? So what's your biggest productivity challenge? And you can choose one of those 4 answers. So is it rising new demands? Is it limited resources? Or is it a backlog of cases? Or do you think you don't have a productivity challenge? Could you answer that question? I think you can only choose one. I know that's quite tricky. When I was a civil servant, I think I would have liked to tick at least 2 of those. But if you could choose one, that would be fantastic. We're going to give you a couple of seconds to do that. And then we will move on to our second question. As I say, we've only got 3 questions, so a couple more minutes or seconds. Okay, Raquel, we'll move on to question 2. So question 2 for you, the audience, as I say, please do answer these questions. Has your government organisation introduced any measures intended to improve public service productivity in the last 12 months? So are you aware of anything that your organisation is already doing in the last 12 months to help improve productivity? Very simple answer there. Yes, no, or you don't know. Yes, no, or you don't know. So please choose one of those. Again, we'll give you a couple of seconds to do that. And we will be putting the responses to these questions up later on in the webinar, so you'll be able to see what your fellow audience members have said in terms of their responses to these. And then question number 3. Question number 3. Is your department using or planning to use technology to unlock greater productivity? So this is specifically about technology. Are you aware of your department or organization, wherever you sit, unit, planning to use technology to help unlock greater productivity? And again, the answers are yes, no, or don't know. Yes, no, or don't know. And I think somebody in the questions, Jacqueline, is having trouble with the poll question. So maybe, Jacqueline, we can maybe message you separately about that. It might be the device you're using. There we go. So there's our 3 questions. Thank you very much to the audience. We will come back and put the results of those 3 questions up once we have heard from our 3 speakers. So on that note, Daniel, I'm going to come over to you and invite you to give some opening remarks.
Happy to. Thank you, Siobhan, and good day to all. Bonjour à tous et à toutes. Great pleasure to be here on this panel discussion today, and thanks for GGF for convening us and organizing this. So I'm calling you today from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, and I'd like to begin by acknowledging that Ottawa is built on unceded and unsurrounded Algonquin Anishinaabe territory. So the people of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia, and their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. So I'm extremely appreciative to be here today. So as mentioned, my name is Daniel Dufault, and I'm Director General Innovation at the Department of Natural Resources Canada. So my role, as Siobhan mentioned, basically, I kind of summarize it in 2 main functions, but one is to help develop a strong clean tech ecosystem in Canada. So, through all levers that we have at our disposal. So it's policies, investments, tax incentive, regulation, international partnership, the Clean Growth Hub that Siobhan mentioned. And the second role is really to help bolster innovation across the natural resources industry, but also within the department. So I'm acting as a a lead, if you want, on experimentation and innovation within the department, which might be closer to Claudia's role. And I will probably right away say what I'm not. So I'm not a tech guy. Although I have extremely competent data scientists and engineers in my team, I'm a policy person. And second thing, when I read the panel description, I won't say that I would call myself a civil service expert, although it's fair enough to say that I've been with the public service for quite a while now. So in terms of quick opening remarks and the issue at hand today, which is around boosting public service productivity, I'll briefly mention that what I see as some of the kind of challenges for Government Canada and some of the solutions we have implemented, and I'll touch on these very briefly in my opening remarks. And when talking about productivity, I want to highlight as well that I think it's important to say that productivity or efficiency is obviously super important. This is looking at innovative approach to deliver public admin that results in cost savings. So it's often, productivity often is associated also with cost savings, but we also always want to look at effectiveness. So it's more looking at, innovation that generate more value for dollars spent. So it's also in terms of impact. So it's both efficiency and effectiveness. Whenever I talked about, that productivity angle. So the first slide I have here is just to look at some of, what our Siobhan was asking, some of the innovation or productivity challenges that the Canadian government face. And obviously these are coming from my personal perspective, but I don't think any of them will surprise any of you. So, it's having that right culture that sufficiently enable public servants, to embrace risk. Not an easy thing for public servant. Enable them to really show initiative and really, again, push the envelope in terms of being innovative. Second thing is resources and infrastructure requirements. So obviously, we often have limitation on budget, or it can be skills, can be access to technology. So that's a pretty, kind of an important challenge to always keep in mind. The third one is interesting, data privacy and security, something that has been gaining and, it's always been there. But given kind of the era that we're in terms of geopolitical instability or even low trust in government by civil society, data privacy and security are kind of top concerns. And obviously the access to these new technologies is making this even more, at risk. So this is certainly something very important to keep in mind. IP management, there's a risk associated with intellectual property. So it's finding the right balance between open science, open data, and kind of looking at revenue generation from public government sponsored research. So this is something, that can be a bit of a challenge. You need to figure this one out. And last one I have here is just directives and governance regulations. So I think, in some cases, certainly in Canada, government can be too slow at providing guidance, providing the guardrails, providing the right incentives, to adopt new technologies and such. So this is, again, something that can certainly slow down adoption of innovation. So on the next slide, so basically, if you want to be innovative, you need to address all of these considerations. As far as I'm concerned, all of these considerations or conditions that you need to address in terms of enabling the system to better produce, to be more productive and innovative. So some of the measures we've tried in my department, which is NRCan in short, that have been particularly effective and efficient, I would say, a few of them are listed here, but the Digital Accelerator, and again, I'll touch very briefly on them, but as an office composed of highly specialized data scientists, they have access to specific software, hardware, unique skill sets, and it really enables them to use AI, machine learning, into the work that we do across the department. And they work in a co-creation model whereby we go across the department, we engage with different sectors where that culture is not necessarily there. They don't know how to use these technologies, and we enable them to do this, and we do it in partnership with them under really concrete projects and outcomes. So it's really enabling us to really bring that new capacity, the use of these technology through these sectors. And one of the big focus of the DA is really to create that digitally driven culture. So they spend a lot of time also on the culture element. So it's been very successful here. This initiative was launched back in 2019. Second initiative I'll mention is called PARCA, which is a program that's looking at leveraging social sciences. So it's basically looking at using behavioral sciences to help inform what we do in terms of policy development, program development, comms approach with respect to climate change. You can think of adoption of ZEVs or heat pumps or these type of activities. But it's been extremely powerful in terms of onboarding behavioral scientists, and again, working across the department to really enable the integration of what social sciences can do, but also help foster that culture in terms of thinking outside of the box in terms of what could be done by bringing kind of new talents and access to new technologies and such to this program. And the last piece here that I have to mention, of course, which has been working very well, and this has been a great partnership with GGF. It's the Public Service Data Challenge. So it's a challenge which is announced or launched to all public servants, to come forward with proposals using data and digital tech that can do pretty much anything, as long as it's, good for government or for the public good, broadly speaking. There's a selection process. We have judges and advocates, semi-final, final. So it's a very, very kind of fun challenge. And it really aims to advance the government application of digital solutions, and again, it goes a long way in terms of fostering that digitally driven culture. So it's been a very successful initiative here in Canada. We're currently running our second iteration of the challenge with incredible results. So, I'll kind of leave it at that. All these are kind of point that needs to be embraced. And looking at these three initiatives, I'll say what's the common point here is probably that the fuse we've been able to use to ignite that innovation spirit has really been data and the use of advanced digital tech. So it's just, that's kind of the fuse that's being used to really being able to bolster productivity and innovation across the government.
Daniel, thank you so much. That's a brilliant way for us to start, because you've really summarized really nicely like the challenges and then some of the solutions that you have already put in place in Canada. So the challenges that I noted down that you said there, the kind of culture, helping people to embrace risk in kind of a managed way, resourcing and kind of infrastructure. So some of those limitations on budgets and restrictions on budgets, big challenge across the public sector. Data privacy and security, especially in the context, the kind of global context that we're in at the moment. Challenges around intellectual property risks, and then that kind of the whole legislation, guidance, regulation sphere as well, and do we move fast enough in the public sector? And also I just think the theme running through from the start, I'll come on to the solutions, but innovation as a driver of productivity, so actually getting people to think differently, try new things. And then great to hear about some of those solutions, the Digital Accelerator, PARCA, both bringing in specialists to work in partnership with other professions and with policy people. And fantastic that you brought up there the Public Service Data Challenge, which does indeed help people to kind of think differently, create new ways of working, and in particular work across departments on kind of new ways of working. And data being the kind of common thread. I think data as a way of improving productivity, a really, really important message there. Thank you so much, Daniel. Fantastic way for us to start. And then Jennifer, I'm going to come over to you.
All right. Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much to Global Government Forum for including me in this. I work for SAS, which is a data and AI company, and we have been doing analytics and AI for decades. And so it's very exciting to see the rise of AI in government. I work with governments in my role. I work with governments across the globe. So I got to hear from a lot of different perspectives. And what we know is that old adage, do more with less, has never been more true now at this time when we have constrained workforce. We have budget limitations, and we have government growing in scope. We have this expansive body of work that governments are doing. Right now, our labor shortage is really affecting governments, and it will continue to do so as we have what we call in the United States a silver tsunami, with people retiring, but also a lot of people leaving the public sector to go to private sector jobs. So we have fewer people trying to do the work, and that's really challenging at a time when we have the scope of government growing. And there's so many reasons for that, but among the many reasons, our citizens are expecting more, and they have higher expectations for real-time answers and just better government. And then second to that, technology itself is driving that body of work that we have as we have more digital fraud, we have more digital crimes. All of that is inspiring more work for our governments. And then this is kind of a maybe a triple hit with a budget constraint. I know a lot of governments are experiencing that end to stimulus funds that had been poured out over the last 4 years or so. In addition to that, governments are reeling from inflation. So not only is inflation affecting our citizens, but it's affecting governments that have to buy services and pay for capital expenditures. So that's really hurting us. And then on top of that, wages are rising. And so governments are having to pay more for the work that's being done. The good news is that AI is on the scene and can help governments tackle some of these productivity challenges. We did a survey going back about 3.5 years ago of government civil servants and asked them if they were likely to be using AI in their offices. And we were very surprised that a large number of the respondents said no, they have no intention, not only presently or in the future, to use AI. And then in November 2020, ChatGPT came on the scene. And suddenly people had an idea and got to touch and play with AI and see the benefits of using artificial intelligence in their work. But they also got to see some of the risks, right? So you see some of the vulnerabilities that people can experience with using AI. So we're seeing varied uptake of artificial intelligence by a lot of governments. What we're seeing is a high uptake of people using large language models like Microsoft Copilot or ChatGPT to help them to write documents or to do having chat boxes or chat services with their citizens. But a lot of governments still have this opportunity to take on some of these other technologies that exist for them that will be able to be transformational. We're talking about machine learning that can help detect these patterns and trends, or computer vision that can help translate images or video, natural language processing, which helps with that communication between the machine and computers, and of course, other generative AI technologies. We have the potential, our governments have the potential to be able to save a huge amount of work, and they save hours using AI, replacing these repetitive and mundane tasks that they don't enjoy doing, but also being able to provide services in a more timely manner. I read recently that the Boston Consulting Group estimates that governments are going to be able to have productivity savings of $1.75 trillion per year with the use of generative AI. So this is a substantial gain coming to us for governments. As I mentioned, governments are varied in what they're taking up with AI at this time. But what we're seeing is a slower uptake of AI, or artificial intelligence, in the public sector than we are in the private sector. And a lot of people are like, well, why is that? Is it because we have skill shortages? Yeah, that's part of it. But the biggest part is that we have a mandate to protect the privacy and security of our citizens and the data that we hold. And so for that reason, we're seeing a lot of governments stepping through this very cautiously, which I think is wise. At SAS, we talk about our 6 principles of trustworthy AI, the responsibility that we have. And Daniel was talking about the data at the heart of these AI solutions and technology innovations, and that's absolutely true. And I'll put up a little slide here in the notes, but we talk about human centricity, keeping humans in the loop. We talk about inclusivity, accountability, transparency, resiliency, and privacy and security. And so all of that comes together for protecting data. But what I'm asked repeatedly by people is, I'm really excited. I want to use AI. I want to be able to do my job faster and easier, but I'm concerned that AI is going to take over my job. And I don't want to become obsolete in my office. And so when people bring up this concern, I talk about this, which you see this slide here about what humans are good at and what machines are good at. And we really don't see that machines are going to be able to replace the productivity and the skills that humans bring to the table, that common sense, that intuition, creativity, empathy, and versatility. Yes, machines are fantastic about doing that work that we don't have the time to do and we don't have the desire to do, right? Processing huge data sets or running complex calculations, identifying those discrete patterns and trends that are elusive to us, hidden in the data, and being able to automate tasks. So if you can go to the next slide there, Raquel, really we talk about humans and machines together and how can we work productively together to have these greater gains. And so a machine might be able to detect these patterns and trends, but it's the human that can make sense of those and to say, well, so what? Why is this important? The machine does these complex calculations, but the humans are interpreting the results. So I really don't think that humans will become obsolete with the use of machines. It's just that our work is going to become more refined. We're going to be able to do more thought-provoking work, a lot of the less mundane work. So we have a lot of opportunities here. So as we move forward and talk about adopting AI and generative AI, what we're really talking about is finding the right technologies to address our challenges and finding that right complement between humans and machines.
Jennifer, thank you so much. A really interesting perspective there from SAS. So you also bring in some other challenges in addition to the ones that Daniel mentioned, some of those productivity challenges, expectations from the public, for example, rising in terms of what their government can do for them. At the same time, costs for government rising, got aging populations putting stress on public services, competition for jobs with the private sector, technology as a potential solution, but as you said, also bringing in other challenges for government. So fraud issues, creating cyber attacks that government has to deal with, all taking up resources and time. But AI there potentially being transformative in terms of the way it could solve some of these things. And really interesting how you say how quickly the public servants and civil servants uptake has grown since things like ChatGPT have come in and people can actually play around with it themselves. Huge potential, as you say, for saving time and saving money, getting rid of some of those mundane tasks and freeing up human time to spend on the more thought-provoking work. And then you're absolutely right. Whenever we talk about productivity and technology, we also get those concerns around people's jobs. And what you said there, really interesting. What can humans do? What can machines do? And it's not so much a replacing, it's a complementing each other and working together. Thank you so much, Jennifer. So much in there, lots of food for thought, and great to see we've already got questions coming in. So please do keep those coming in. And then Claudia, I'm coming over to you now.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to join the Global Government Forum with distinguished colleagues and audience, and to be able to debate a topic that lies at the heart of our efforts to create a better public service, which is new approaches to productivity. And in my case, I feel I'll take the opportunity to expand it a little bit and tackle performance overall, because even though the importance to increase efficiency, especially in the fiscal constraint context we have, for me as a public servant, focusing only on productivity or doing more with less is not enough. I believe our mandate to create value for citizens, societies, to improve service delivery lead us to focus on performance more broadly, capturing quality, responsiveness, and impact of our services. But to begin with, as we all know, achieving greater performance is easier said than done. There are a lot of challenges. My colleagues went through some of them. And in my case, I would highlight that a big challenge relates to the fact that, as a colleague of mine mentioned, in the public sector, we have institutions created in the 19th century using technologies from the 20th century to solve problems from the 21st century. So this leads us to some outdated organizational structures and institutional arrangements, technological lags in some areas, and a mismatch between the process that we've developed, the skills we have, and the contemporary challenges such as climate change, social inequalities, and AI regulation and things like that. So these all challenge us in terms of delivering more and better services. More specifically, in terms of technology, I think there's a challenge, a big challenge, still replacing legacy system, reducing maintenance costs, and speeding up digitalization and the race towards unlocking AI potential to help governments perform better. In the Brazilian context, an important challenge also comes from our legalistic tradition and our bureaucratic rigidity that limits our ability to mobilize sticks and carrots to promote better performing people. And so we do have a reduced menu of options compared to the private sector or other countries to reward higher performers and dismiss underperformers. And this is a big challenge. And with regard to institutional arrangements, also there's a challenge that traditional performance systems and people management tools aren't sufficient to drive performance. We must recognize this. We still rely on performance appraisal systems that are protocolar, that are disconnected from strategies to actually make people perform better. And to add, command and control culture, micromanagement, high power distance, these are all associated with a disengagement and low productivity. And in fact, and I'll ask my slide to come in, as we approach the well-being of public servants and employees overall, there's some important facts that we need to be addressed. As you see, both in Latin America and the rest of the world, overall employee well-being is being declined. And people are still struggling at work with direct consequence to their productivity. And these figures come out of the Gallup State of Global Workplace 2024. And you can see only 23% of people declare themselves as engaged in their work, whereas you see 41% of people feeling stressed on a daily basis, and a fifth of employees reporting that they experience high levels of angriness, sadness, loneliness at work. This has a huge impact on performance, and Gallup has come out with this figure of 8.9 trillion in losses globally with disengagement in the workplace. So this is to say, why is this important? Because growing scientific evidence shows that engagement is an important predictor for productivity, for organizational resilience and performance. And moving on, so what are the strategies that we need to come up with to deal with this scenario? In our case, we do work with human-centered approaches, results-based frameworks, and trying to come up with some flexibility, adaptability in the public sector so that we can mobilize smart incentives. So in terms of human-centered approaches, we created our behavior insight units, and I already want to speak to Daniel later on about the Canadian experience, because it's a way for us to bring in more scientific data on how people actually behave and interact with public services. Sometimes we do a lot of policy formulation, but we don't stop too much to think, what are the main assumptions we have on human behavior and how they affect the way we perform? So our unit is dealing with this and advocating for more use of behavioral science in policy formulation. We also created a lab to create more value, public value, through enhancing employee experience. This is the Labora Gov, and Labora is working right now recognizing the importance of employee experience, studying, curating relevant content, developing tools, testing them, and disseminating them through many ways, studies, workshops, mentorships, and so on, to promote more innovative and productive practice in the public sector. And some of the things that we are covering is like the future of the public service, the role for diversity, equality, and inclusion strategies, data storytelling, how to use employee experience to foster productivity and performance in the public sector. So we basically emphasize human-centered approaches and capacity building towards modern practices for developing and caring for people. So we want to help leaders to foster positive emotions, psychological safety, collaborative relationships, and creative freedom in the workplace. Right now, some of the numbers we've helped over 60 organizations in the Brazilian public sector, provided more than 300 services, reaching out over 80,000 people with our work. And this, our recognition already came from several awards we got, including the Creative Bureaucracy Festival, the Brazilian National Innovation Awards, just to name a few. But I have to rush here, finishing with another initiative we have, because along with helping leaders and organizations to reach a more human-centered approach, we also developed an ambitions management and performance program that provides a framework to replace frequency control and by results control. And you can hear the seismic impacts that this can have on the way organizations function right here. We took on from an experience we had to develop in the pandemics to go on remote, and we expanded it. And the way it works is, instead of registering the hours that you spend in the office, you create a working plan and along with your boss to see how you're going to contribute to your organizational unit. And this will be monitored continuously. Every month, you're going to have a feedback from your boss. And it's interesting because this way and I can have this slide on also here to show some of the results. This is a way we're connecting the strategy of the organization with the daily work, so people can be productive, but on the right way. So next slide, please. So because sometimes this is a problem. People will be very much productive, but are they going the right direction the organization wants them to go? So when we come up with a strategy so that people will connect what they intend to do in a month with what the organization planned for his unit, and the more strategic plan, this connects in an innovative way what people do. It fosters a management and results culture, increasing productivity, engagement, results. We've seen already 93% decrease in expenses because people in this program can have the opportunity to choose the work design, and if they're gonna do their work in remote, hybrid, or physical way in office, they can also decide whether they want to do it synchronically with their team or not, and when they want to do it. So it allows a lot of flexibility to come in, and this has shown us an important vector for increasing productivity, reducing absenteeism, and also improving product and service quality. So this is to say, Brazil is trying to come up with non-technological improvements as well, and pushing for productivity, but mainly overall performance, recognizing the importance to focus on our human side. And then I tend to think it's so interesting that all the discussions on AI has lead us to think more on our nature, our human nature, right? So yeah, finishing this,
Brilliant.
thank you so much. And
Claudia,
thank you
thank
for
you.
this opportunity.
Thank you so much. And as you say, it's always interesting how much when we have conversations about technology, we come back to the human part of that right at the center. But really interesting to hear from you some of the challenges that you have specifically in Brazil. You're saying not just on the technology challenges that we've covered in some of our other presentations, but also, and I think Daniel touched on this as well, some of the old legislative frameworks being a kind of barrier to productivity, improving productivity, but also that bureaucratic culture, that kind of history of doing things in a particular way. And how do you break out from that? And as you've concentrated on today, really looking at performance management and more modern ways of doing performance management as a means of driving reform. You mentioned moving away from that micromanagement and a focus on the hours that you kind of clock up, more to a human-centered approach, looking at results-based, so looking at how have you met the objectives for your unit, and giving people more autonomy and flexibility, and how that's having huge positive impacts on productivity, not least reducing days off, but also that you have a thriving workforce who want to be working for the organization. And then touching again on what Daniel said as well, I think the use of behavioral science and behavioral insights to get insights into not just how employees are feeling about working across the public sector, but also how citizens are using public services, so that you can really be quite efficient in targeting your policy interventions as well. Thank you so much to all of you. You really have piqued everybody's interest, because we've got lots of questions coming in already. Before we go to the questions, I'm just going to ask Raquel behind the scenes if she is ready to put up the results from those 3 questions that we asked, because I'd also like to bring in those as we think about our questions. So the first question was, what would you say is the primary reason for the productivity challenge? And there, so a little bit of everything. I'm interested who doesn't think they have a productivity challenge across the public sector. That would be interesting to know more of that. Very lucky if you don't. But limited resources coming out as the biggest productivity challenge. I think that builds on what you said, Jennifer, around just that sense of having to do more with less all of the time. So maybe we can comment on that in a moment. So that was limited resources. Then question number 2, what was that one, Raquel? How did that one come out? So that was, has your government organisation introduced any measures intended to improve public service productivity in the last month? So yes, I think unsurprising there, over half say they're definitely aware of things that are going on to improve productivity on that one. And then the final question was, is your department using or planning to use technology to unlock greater productivity? Wow, that is a huge 77% say yes, they're aware of technology being used to unlock greater productivity. But really interesting, I think, Claudia, what you said, it's not just the technology, there's also all this other work as well, but 77%. So thank you so much, Raquel, for those. Jennifer, I was just going to come to you very quickly for your reflections. Does any of that surprise you? And would you see kind of limited resources as being the biggest challenge facing the public sector?
Yeah, I definitely thought that would be it. My other role when I'm not at SAS is as an elected official at the local level, and I would say limited resources is what we grapple with the most. And when we talk about those resources, the biggest one that I think is our human resources and being able to make the most of everybody's time.
Daniel, I'm going to come to you as well on that one. I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me, Daniel?
Yeah, I lost you for a minute, but
Sorry.
back
Just
now.
coming to you as well on that one. Did anything surprise you in those results? Do you also think it's limited resources that are the biggest challenge, with technology being a way of using that? Or do you see other really big productivity challenges around culture and maybe lack of joining up as well and kind of reinventing the wheel? Are they also big challenges?
Well, I think kind of that proverb that says necessity is the mother of invention and innovation. So I think productivity. So of course, limited resources, they need to do more with less. Absolutely, that's more of an imperative, right? And Jennifer said it right. I mean, pretty much all governments nowadays are facing this, and things will probably just exacerbate as we go on. So I think productivity is simply an imperative, right? Kind of one of our participants said, we need to acknowledge that there will be job losses, and I think it's a given. We need to be more productive. We need to streamline. We need to be a bit more nimble, and you do that because you have less money, you have less resources. So that's where technology comes in, and this is not this is not only for governments. You look at how companies across the world, Tesla and others, that's what they're doing, right? Increasing, lowering the number of employees, using technologies. It's being smart. The jobs, some of the jobs will change, some of the jobs will totally disappear. So that's a reality. I think we need to be upfront about it. Absolutely. It's going to give opportunities in terms of new skills and new type of work. But of course, limited resources is definitely an imperative. For me, another thing which I think is which is part of the challenge is creating a bit of a safe space, right? So it is back to that culture element, but it's creating a safe space where people, public servants in particular, because that's how we're trained, right? To be extremely careful. Everything we do has to be kind of excellence, transparency, privacy, respect, everything. So it's how do you enable public servants to feel empowered to actually use these technologies, to actually go beyond, right, and take some risks, basically. Private companies are pretty good at this, high-tech companies in particular, but governments is a very different thing. So how do we, as government, provide public servants with that safe space where they can actually feel like empowered to try these things? So I think you have to again provide them with some guidance, guardrails, directives, be very clear, but at the same time not set too hard limits so that you actually are, so it's finding that balance, right? But I think we need to get better at this.
How do you facilitate innovation and allow people to experiment? And Claudia, I'm going to come to you as well. Any thoughts on those findings from those 3 questions? And obviously you're focused less on the technology side, but do you think you have to go through what you're doing first before, as Daniel said, you can then have people feeling like they can adopt new technologies? They have to be given the kind of permission to kind of try some of these new things first.
It's not actually that I think it needs to be first, but I think there are definitely some low-hanging fruits out there. A lot of productivity gains that you can reach without too much resource investments. So, and this leads us to practices, to leadership skills and things that we can mobilize quite in a short term and very good results. And I think we definitely can invest that. And I'm saying that in a developing country where resources constraints is the reality, but what we're seeing is we can definitely get some results, some good productivity results, investing with what we have right now. Just moving practices and everything.
Yeah, thanks, Claudia. Okay, we're going to go straight over to the audience questions because we do have quite a few coming in. So Natalie sent in one of the first questions. I really like this question because she's saying, how can we balance the increasing kind of speed, quantity and complexity of demands coming from all sides with our need to invest time to understand technology tools? So essentially, how do you free up time, I think, to train people on some of the new technologies or some of the new approaches? Maybe Claudia, in your case, how do we free up people's time when they're so busy just delivering on everything that's coming their way? Jennifer, your thoughts on this?
Okay, well, one thing that comes to mind is that there are a lot of productivity tools that are enabled by technology that don't require a lot of training. So that may be the first direction to go to, is looking at those that have a low level of adoption. For example, we have a solution that uses the AI technologies of machine learning and computer vision and natural language processing. So these technologies to read documents that are either in paper form or PDF form and extract from them the insights. You don't need to have a lot of training to be able to use it. You don't have to know how to do AI. you just are the recipient, the user of it. And so, and that kind of solution can save, many, many, many hours of labor and help bring services faster to your citizens. So in all those savings that you have for not having to, be churning paper or scanning PDFs, you can use all that time and say, okay, now we want to use that extra time to be able to enable our workforce in those other skills that they might need, those technology skills. But there's a lot of savings that they can, time savings that they can experience through
Yeah.
some easy solutions.
Thanks. Daniel, anything that you would like to add on that? How do we kind of free up people's time to understand some of these new technologies that they can use?
On that one, I think honestly, I think management has a lot to do. Like, it has to come from corporate, from central agencies that are actually pushing this out, that are actually saying, you actually have to, we want you to be innovative. We want you to experiment. We want you to try out these new technologies. That, like the culture shift cannot come just from employee themselves. I mean, absolutely, it comes from them as well, but it has to come from higher up as well. It's a top down and a bottom up. So to me, it's again, governance is a major piece. Is like, make it an imperative. Make it an imperative. If you're a government, make it an imperative to actually, for the departments to report on what they've done, to show that they've been experimenting, that they've been trying new technology, that they've been looking at productivity, like inclusivity and all these other things, right? So so just make it what we call an area of management. We have a management accountability framework in Canada, in the government of Canada, and you report. And now, very recently, as one of the area of management, innovation, it's its own piece. It used to be merged with results. The focus was all about results. It wasn't so much about innovation. Now innovation has been singled out as, more closely to experimentation. And now all departments have this, like Kodja was talking about, like they have to measure, they have to report back, they have to demonstrate. So if you do this, you will be allocating, you will be forcing departments to allocate resources towards it. And that's going to trickle down. You'll be able to set up offices like Kodja's office or the DA that will actually go out and work with public servants that are crazy busy, with day-to-day, to tell them, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? We can help you. We have some skills, we have some knowledge, but we want to work with you. So you try to instill that culture. Yeah. So it's really starts from, governance, and then you actually try to really work your way in terms of giving time, dedicating resources, making it part of the day-to-day that employees, when they design program, when they run policy, when they actually think, oh, I got to experiment. I got to think outside the box. I can't be stuck in, short-term delivery. I got to actually think broader. So I think it's
And I think the question as well is, how do you free up time from people? And I think, as you say, that has to come from management. So it's easy to say we want to allow people time to experiment or time to train, 5 days training or whatever, but that's not happening.
Like if we're running the Public Service Data Challenge, people are actually, they're doing this on top of their regular day-to-day work. Yeah. So of course, management has to say, absolutely, we'll free up time for you to participate in this, because this is brilliant, right? So
thanks. Claudia, I'm going to come to you on a slightly different question that's coming, because I think this was a follow-up to your presentation. This has come in from Celine, I think, Singh, who has said, I'm not quite sure I understand this, so if you don't, Claudia, I can ask for clarification from the question, but in what ways are organizations moving towards building employee experiences versus concentrating solely on employee engagement? And I know you mentioned employee experience. Did you want to respond to that question?
Yes, thank you. Yes, when we're talking about increasing employee experience, we're talking basically increasing trust within the workplace. I think this is an important aspect if you want to invest in employment experience. So in this, we normally talk about 8 steps in recognizing the excellence and providing real feedback to people, challenging them, give them autonomy, have them the opportunity to make choices. This is so important in the workplace. And sometimes we just overlook it. and also give transparency, build relationships intentionally. And we're discussing so much the importance to have organizations that provide connections. Also to something very important and very unusual for us leaders to do is to show vulnerability. So these are some of the aspects that you need in order to have a workplace that is more human-centered, provides more meaningful place for people to where they want to be. It's not that they need to be there, they want to be there. This is a place where you successfully deploy employee experience strategies. Yes.
Thanks. Now I understand absolutely in that answer what Celine was asking. I really like this question. I'm gonna give this question to all of you because Aishath Shahuda, I think is her name or his name, has said, how do you reduce time in meetings at management level? I love this as a productivity question. How do you reduce time in meetings? Is this a technology issue or is this a cultural issue? We can answer this one quite quickly, I think, but your thoughts on making meetings shorter. I guess a lot of people think they spend too much time in meetings. Jennifer, you're smiling at this one. I'm going to come to you first.
Yeah, I think it's more cultural than it is technology. I mean, for us personally, I think if an email suffices, don't meet. Yeah, I think we have the tendency to convene over a lot of things that perhaps an email would be just fine.
Thanks, Jennifer. Daniel, do you suffer from this? Too many meetings, not very good use of people's time?
Not as much as I used to. Because again, because of the virtual, but there is a comment coming from a Canadian fellow, about the fact that we are in Canada, the government is, federal government, we're being asked to go back to the office. And whenever we go back to the office, we're being told you go in the meeting room, right? You don't take it from your office. That's not, that's not the purpose of it. So for me, the pandemic and the new virtual world has definitely lowered because you can multitask. Honestly, you do, right? A lot of the meetings, like if it's one-on-one, of course, you're entirely focused, but a lot of these, director general level meeting or whatever, of course, there's a lot of the topics that aren't extremely relevant to you, but you actually work away doing different things. So in terms of productivity, the gain has been tremendous, right? So that's something that I'm personally struggling with in terms of way forward. I've been fine with my meetings because most of them, like I'll be concentrated. Whatever, when I have these meetings, it's actually work is happening, right? That this is part of the work. It's really important. But I totally appreciate that going back into the office where you actually sit, with people. You're not like on your phone or your laptop working away while people are actually talking. This is just disrespectful. So I think there's going to be something that will need to be worked out in terms of figuring out how we get back to, like how do we manage it. So for me, that personally, that will be a challenge. It hasn't been so much over the last 2 years, but going forward, I certainly see that this is going to be be getting a bit more challenging. We know we need these meetings.
We'll come on to that question as well that Taya has asked in a moment, just so the others can answer it. But very quickly, Claudia, your thoughts on meetings. Is this part of your employee experience kind of improvement as well?
Oh, definitely. We need to overcome the obsession with meetings to discuss and decide on everything. And I think that one of the ways we're trying to overcome it is to provoke not synchronous discussions. So since we are mostly on remote work right now, we try to, provoke people to, hey, list whatever we have in topics and let's see what we need to actually discuss together in a meeting. Yeah, but it's on my unit. So there's a lot of more people out there to convince to go this way. Yes.
Well, I'm going to come back to hybrid working in a moment because I think it's really interesting, the different perspectives of whether people are more productive at home or more productive in the office. So we'll come back to that one. But I do want to come back to Petra. So Petra sent in a question right at the start as well and said, surely if we're going to be more efficient and productive, so using things like AI, shouldn't we be honest and say there will be job losses and that we will all have smaller civil services, which will be a good thing because it will cost the taxpayer less? I really like this question because it goes back to those concerns that maybe some public servants have about the impact that AI will have ultimately. And I know we are saying it will complement, not replace jobs, but is that more of a short, medium term view? And longer term, are we looking at a reduction overall, do you think, in the number of jobs in the public sector? Daniel, I will come to you. What's your very honest take on this?
Well, I kind of touched on it earlier on, but I mean, again, job losses, I don't know that job losses will be the result of new technologies. I think job losses are just, it's a cycle. We go through these phases. I mean, this is where we are. I think most governments, certainly the case for Canada, regardless of the colors of the new government, we will be going through election. I think there's going to be streamlining. There's going to be, I don't know that it's going to be job losses, but no staffing back of some of the, natural attrition without necessarily staffing back because the public, just the size of the public service has been growing steadily for a number of years. So again, I think it's not necessarily an unhealthy exercise. And of course, you want to compensate if there's less, then it's an opportunity to use these technologies to compensate. Again, is it a bad thing? I don't think so. I think we've always strived to become more productive, in terms of both, again, efficiency and effectiveness. So, some of the jobs, as Peter is saying, some of the jobs that we currently have won't exist tomorrow, and this is true for government as well as industry, right? So it's just a reality. I think for public service, you still remain, it's a very safe place because you'll never replace like a lot of these jobs, because a lot of it is stakeholder engagement. It is building these relationships. It is, so yeah, a lot of it will remain in terms of public service, but of course some of these jobs will be automated, right, to an extent, so that will have implications, of course.
Thanks, Daniel. And Claudia, your thoughts on kind of technology and the impact that will ultimately have on the workforce?
I think if you look on long term, definitely will be important transformations among careers, among jobs. And I think right now what we need to go is to look at impacts of automation and start rethink careers and what we need in terms of reskilling, redefining roles in the government, and try to have a more strategic look at this. And yeah, in the long term, I mean, there'll be big transformations, but I like to look at the opportunities that we have as well to make people do better work and to, provide more value that they are actually doing right now. How they say AI provides an opportunity to make time management more efficient. And I saw this figure that about over 50% of our time is dedicated to information management. So when you bring AI and you can optimize it, I think, I tend to look at it in a positive way.
Yeah, thanks, Claudia. Well, on that note, Jennifer, your thoughts. I know you had those great slides about how machines and humans would be kind of working together. So anything you want to add to what Daniel and Claudia have said about the overall impact on numbers? But also I want to bring in Alia Carter has said, can AI help with the email deluge at leadership level? So is there a new communication era, Donna? So you'd mentioned some of those mundane tasks that AI could do. Do you think it's going to help with people's inboxes ultimately as well?
Yeah, I'm sure it will, because we see the development of large language models and the application of them assisting in so many ways, especially as a tool for summarization. So yes, I could see large language models doing that, and I think Ali's onto something pretty innovative there. I agree completely with Daniel and Claudia that there will be a shift in job roles, and people will be doing more meaningful work. The tasks that are mundane and repetitive, those jobs probably will go away. But as a time when we have the shortage in labor, I think it's not going to be people being let go so much as you see jobs not being refilled and shifted. There's going to be major shifts going on. A friend of mine says that when people ask him if AI is going to take his job, he says, no, AI is not going to take your job. Someone who knows how to use AI is going to take your job. And I think that is very true. I think all these productivity tools that we have with technology are going to demand a workforce that knows how to use technology. And so upskilling and retraining people is going to be very important.
Which goes back to the question we had about making sure we build in time for people to learn how to use some of the new technologies. I can't believe how fast the time is going. We've got just about 10 minutes left, and we've got two great questions to get through. So the first one, it's a long question, and Daniel, you kind of have already touched on quite a lot of this, but from Taha Tabish, who is in Canada and has kind of said, how do we kind of reconcile the flexibility of hybrid working that was there post-COVID and during COVID, but now with this demand, increasingly we're seeing this in different countries, different governments around the world, that officials are being asked to go back to the office, if not full-time, then kind of 3 days a week, maybe. And I think the question is about, is this the wrong approach? So are we more productive? And Claudia, this builds on what you were saying. Are we more productive allowing people to be more flexible and working from different locations, given we have the technology to do that now? Or do we think people are more productive coming back together into the office, albeit maybe not full-time, but at least a few days? So your thoughts on, I'm going to rephrase the question slightly. Do you think people are more productive in a hybrid future, or should we be trying to bring people back into the office more? Daniel, I will come to you again, just if you want to add anything to what you already said on this.
Well, because this one is applicable to the Canadian, situation in particular, I'm kind of keen to hear from Claudia in terms of her view of that one. It's a bit of it's a tough one, honestly. It's a tough one. Because I certainly don't know the answer. I don't have, I don't know what's the best. I kind of like flexibility. I think, showing flexibility is enabling actually, a lot of productivity gains and innovation in the public service. So, and I think there's certainly benefits in having a workforce which is distributed across the country, because, Canada, very, very different realities from one region to the next, and pathways to net zero, very different approaches across the board. So I think it's always helpful in terms of that relationship, in terms of knowing the ecosystem. But I think it's that struggle that government has in terms of that element of social cohesion. So this is what was referred to as more the collaboration space versus the productivity. So I think, strictly speaking, from productivity perspective, I think if you're working from home, you probably are putting in, if you're kind of a good public servant, probably putting in more hours. Just from a production standpoint, even if you go do some chores in between, you're probably at the end of the day are putting more hours in your work and are being, overall probably more productive. But that social cohesion element is not there, because and then of course presumably that also brings productivity gains, because when you brainstorm more and you're together, that there's that level of energy, So I totally appreciate pros and cons on both ends. And the decisions here is not like I'm talking to you from my personal standpoint. Of course, the decisions from us is coming from central agencies that are setting the directives, and this gets implemented across the board by DGs as well as all public servants. So
thanks. I think you very clearly set out it's not that simple. It's not just about the hours. It's also about other factors and bringing people together, as you've said. Claudia, and then Jennifer, did you want to add anything on the productivity and hybrid working? Claudia, obviously this is a big area for you.
Yeah, it is. I have 120 employees, all working fully remote right now in my team. And I would say that hybrid work is not a silver bullet. Neither hybrid or 100% remote work is a silver bullet. It's not going to solve main or structural problems we have in productivity terms. But it does provide an interesting area to stimulate, to motivate, to have people, deploy their time in a better way during work hours. But I cannot overstate the importance of leaders to make it work. because leaders are the ones who have to create this shared view on what are we doing, where are we heading. Leaders are the ones who's going to make sure we have intentional meetings or connections created among the team in order to, fulfill this social capital thing within the group. And also leaders have to monitor and to deploy more management tools. Whereas when you're in a physical office, you just show up and you say, hey, you're here, you can, come up with questions and improvise more than when you're remote. On remote mode, you have to plan in advance, you have to monitor, you have to, check on people, give feedback more frequently. So yes, I think it does have a big potential to raise productivity, but you need to come up with a strong, prepared leadership to make it happen.
Thanks, Claudia. Yeah, again, proving it's not that easy. Jennifer, did you want to add anything on the hybrid working?
No, go on to the next question there.
So our final question, I'll put this to you first, Jennifer, and then I'll come to Daniel and then Claudia for final thoughts on this one. So this has come from Tonya. I like this question because it goes to the heart, I think, of what we've been talking about. Why do you think we are so risk averse in the public sector or civil service? Because we have security of employment, yet we're unwilling to think outside the box, essentially. So why, it goes back to the cultural thing as well. And Jennifer, you must work a lot with public servants. Can you answer Tonya's question? Why are public servants so risk averse? Or do you think they are?
Yeah, well, what a deep question. There's probably a lot of elements to this, but I think one thing is that we are so public facing. If we make a major mistake, if we are responsible for our agency or government body making a big mistake, it's so public, because we assure transparency for our citizens. So there's a lot of vulnerability that stems from that, I think. And new technologies are coming so rapidly, and most of us in our jobs don't have using or working with technology as our primary mission. Our primary mission is to get something else done, right? And so trying out new technologies takes you away from accomplishing your mission, and that can feel like it's, even though it probably does have benefits long term, the short term sacrifices may not feel worth it.
Yeah, brilliant. Love that answer. And Daniel, your thoughts on this? Why are we so risk averse?
I mean, being public servants is kind of the way we've been trained, right? It's kind of the way we've been grown into these jobs. I think maybe, I'm older generation, so maybe today is a bit better than what it was if you're coming into government today. But because we are, like, again, public servants, we are not entitled to the mistakes, right? And I go to a lot of these cabinets and parliament meetings, and public servants will get trashed, by deputies, by parliament members, because they're there to try, or they deviated from governance, and so I think it's totally part of the way the government operates. It doesn't embrace like taking risk. It simply doesn't. So you have to rethink the way you've been operating. I think it's up to central agencies, and then again up to each department and agency to really rethink their approach. So you need to champion it. You need to have someone within the department that actually has a role, that actually has resources, that actually is giving thoughts to this, that is actually safe. Again, creating that safe space to employees so that they feel empowered to actually be creative and think, color outside of the lines.
Thanks,
if it's not coming from higher up, it's really hard to do it. So that, again, that's my thought on that.
Thanks, Daniel. And Claudia, I know it's hard for you to build on that, but I think that, the scrutiny, the lack of leadership, the history, the culture, is there anything else that you think factors into why are we so risk averse?
I could say from the Brazilian perspective, we're very much into command and control traditionally. And failure is something that we just don't accept. Vulnerability is something that we don't show. And we come up with all these organizations where you don't have much psychological safety for people, just to show that they made a wrong turn, that they they were wrong, they were proven wrong. So I think we still lack spaces to test, to experiment, to pilot, and a huge contribution comes from innovation labs right now. So this is a place where people is like saying, hey, come here, try first, and then you escalate and
So really
use data to see, try to come up with data informs decisions, But yes, it's a very good question, very interesting. And I think we need to move forward to more psychological safe and
Claudia, I think
more.
brilliant. Thank you. We just cut out there just at the end there, but thank you so much. I love the fact that you ended on that. It's a great question, because I would like to say thank you to the audience for all your fantastic questions. You sent in so many great questions, and you've taken us right up to the end of the webinar. So thank you so much. I mean, that was a fantastic conversation, I think, around kind of productivity through changing culture, through being more innovative, taking more risks, but also how technology can help huge potential in terms of savings, cost savings, time savings, and just helping people to do things in a very different way. Thank you so much to our fantastic speakers, to Daniel, to Jennifer, and to Claudia, for giving us all of your time and your expertise. Really, really enjoyed that conversation. Just to the audience to say, we have sent you a very short questionnaire. If you could take a couple of minutes to fill in that questionnaire, and we've included in this time some specific questions again on productivity, as I say, which will be part of this research that we're going to do now on productivity. If you could take a few minutes to answer that questionnaire, I'd be hugely grateful. It also means we'll continue to give you the webinars that are of most interest to you as well. Thank you again to our knowledge partner SAS for today. We will be sending everybody that registered, everybody that attended live, a link with this video, so you'll be able to see it all again. You'll be able to share it with your colleagues, anybody that wasn't able to join. And we will also be sending around an article in a couple of weeks' time with all of the key messages that came out from the conversation today. But I think it's left me feeling very positive about a lot of the options that we have for improving productivity going forward. Thank you, Daniel, Jennifer, and Claudia, and I hope to see all of you again very soon on another one of our webinars.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Siobhan.
everybody.
It's a
Goodbye.
pleasure.